All right, we are continuing in learning how Daniel was a man of resolve in a trying and oppressive culture and time period in history. And as the people of God now, in this trying time, we have to be those who make resolves, who set our heart on what is true, who decide, no matter what is around us or what feelings are within us, who decide that God is faithful so that we can find hope in Him. And the resolve that we're looking at today is the resolve that Daniel made to be courageous. Now, it wasn't just Daniel. And the truth is that when one person makes a resolve in God, that resolve is contagious. And that's what's happening right now in our church. And that's what's happening in our city and in our nation. As the people of God make resolves, that resolve spreads. That trust and hope in God's faithfulness, it's contagious and it spreads. And that's what was happening in Daniel's day. Daniel resolved, and those friends around him, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that we read about, they were catching that same heart of resolve. And we looked at the passage in Daniel 3 already on a Sunday, but again, this moment that epitomizes the resolve of courage that Daniel and his friends were walking in, the moment where they are standing before a fiery furnace. And the king looks at them and in paraphrasing says, "You must not bow down to your God. You must bow down to me and to our gods." And what Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego say, it's such a beautiful picture of the courage that they had, the resolve for courage, and really where their courage was coming from. And what they say is, and you've heard the story, they say, King, our God can save us from that fiery furnace that you have planned for us. Our God can do anything. We're not limited by the problems we see in front of us. Our God can save us from anything. But, O King, even if our God doesn't save us, even if we die in that fire, we will never bow down before any other God. As you know the story, they ultimately do indeed get thrown into the furnace, and God meets them. The king looks in and sees not three, not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but four persons, the very presence of God accompanying them in the fire. And of course, the king calls for them to come out, and they come out unsinged, having no effects from the flames. This resolve that they had to be courageous, and I love the way that they answer the king. And you see that their answer, their resolve and courage isn't connected to a certain outcome. They're not only courageous because they're convinced that they won't be hurt by the flames. They actually agree that God may choose not to save them in that moment, and the flames may engulf them. But nevertheless, no matter what God chooses to do in that moment, they are courageous. They are resolved to never bow down before another God. And there is power in a trying time when the people of God resolve to be courageous in God, no matter what fears they are facing. And just remember, courage isn't the absence of feeling fear. One of the ways that I'm confident it's time for me to raise up and resolve to be courageous is actually that I feel fearful. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is stepping forward in faith in the midst of the fear. And so the invitation for us in this trying time isn't to not feel fear. It's not to find some safe place where we won't be affected and we won't be afraid anymore. That's not the call of God in this time. The call of God is for us to resolve to be courageous, to feel the fear, to see the danger, to see the complexity and the reality of the trial, and yet to live resolved, to live decided, to set our heart fixed to be courageous because God is faithful. And when we can live resolved to be courageous because God is faithful, then we can live with hope in these times. I'm with you. Let's resolve to be courageous in this hour.